What does it mean for a film to blow your mind? Is it about shock, like watching someone's head literally explode in scanners? Or is it about that slow, creeping realization that reality might not be real, like in Stalker, Vertigo, or Memento? Today, we're diving into cinema's most cerebral rabbit hole. Films that don't just entertain you, they reprogram you. I'm Mr. Smithee, and these are the movies that will expand, or maybe detonate, your mind. Let's start with the body, because in cinema, the body is often where the mind goes to die or evolve. In Scanners, 1981, David Cronenberg turns psychic warfare into a grotesque ballet of head explosions. It's not just gore, it's about communication breakdown, the horror of ideas too powerful for language, leaking through the skin. And Cronenberg doesn't stop there. In Videodrome, television literally rewires flesh. Long live the new flesh, says James Woods, as if Marshall McLuhan himself just took a bad trip through cable TV. Existence continues that obsession, this time with gaming as biology. The controller plugs into your spine, and suddenly you can't tell if you're playing the game or the game's playing you. And then there's Brian De Palma's Raising Cain, where identity splits open like a Russian doll. It's De Palma doing Hitchcock on acid, turning the structure of a thriller inside out, until what's real and what's imagined blur into one delirious self-portrait. But what happens when the madness isn't just in the characters, but in the filmmaker himself? Lucio Full-Size Cat in the Brain isn't content with blurring fiction and reality. It hacks right through the membrane. Full-Size plays Full-Size, a horror director haunted by his own creations, hallucinating scenes from his films until he can't tell whether he's killing people or just filming it. It's part confessional, part nightmare, and part parody of the very idea of artistic violence. Like Videodrome, it turns the camera into a weapon, but this time the target is the filmmaker's own guilt. Then there's Dario Argento's Stendhal Syndrome, where a woman becomes psychically overwhelmed by paintings, a reminder that art can wound, seduce, and rewire perception as much as any virus. And Ken Russell's Altered States? It's pure 1980s metaphysical chaos. A scientist regresses into a primal being just to feel something real. Together, these films tell us the mind isn't separate from the body. It's trapped inside it, squirming for release. Abel Ferrara picks up that same fever decades later in The Blackout and New Rose Hotel. Films where addiction, technology, and eroticism melt into a single hallucination. In The Blackout, Matthew Modine drifts through a cocaine-fueled void, trapped in loops of memory that might not be his own. New Rose Hotel goes even further. A noir disintegrating in slow motion, where love and betrayal are filtered through digital images. Ferrara's cinema feels like Cronenberg after The Hangover. Flesh stripped of transcendence, still twitching for redemption. His characters don't explode, they dissolve. Now let's step into the next layer. Films that turn perception into a weapon. Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up begins with something as simple as a photograph, a snapshot that might contain a murder. But the more our protagonist enlarges the image, the more reality falls apart. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, perhaps the original cinematic mind game, traps its hero in an endless loop of obsession and illusion. He's trying to resurrect a woman who never really existed, which is basically every cinephile's relationship with the movies. Memento flips time itself, making us experience amnesia in real time. Nolan doesn't just tell the story of memory loss. He edits it into our nervous systems. But sometimes, the mind games aren't cosmic, they're procedural. In Giuseppe Tornatore's A Pure Formality, a writer wakes up in a police station, accused of a murder he can't remember. The interrogation feels less like an investigation and more like a descent into his own unfinished story. By the time you realize what's really happening, the film has quietly folded reality in on itself, like a dream that pretends to be a mystery. Even The Village, often dismissed, deserves redemption here. Shyamalan asks, what if reality is just a collective agreement? What if the scariest twist isn't the monsters outside the walls, but the lies that hold our world together? And In the Mouth of Madness gives us Lovecraft filtered through John Carpenter's punk sensibility. A film so meta, it eats itself alive. When Sam Neill ends up watching the movie he's in, you realize there's no escaping narrative once you've entered its mouth. Of course, no list of mindbenders would be complete without the films that break not just logic, but language. 2001. A Space Odyssey remains the ultimate cinematic acid trip, Kubrick's visual symphony of evolution, death, and rebirth. It's less about astronauts than it is about consciousness itself, drifting toward the infinite. Tarkovsky's Stalker is the slower, spiritual cousin, a pilgrimage into a forbidden zone that grants wishes. But like all great art, the journey matters more than what's found. Then there's Jodorowsky's The Holy Mountain. Imagine if religion took LSD and made a movie about capitalism. It's surrealism as moral awakening, a quest where enlightenment and exploitation blur into one technicolor fever dream. Holy Motors, Leos Carax's love letter to the absurdity of performance, brings it all crashing into the 21st century. One man, many lives, zero answers. Denis Lavant becomes everyone and no one. Cinema itself made flesh. And then, Eraserhead. Lynch's debut isn't just a nightmare. It's the purest cinematic representation of anxiety ever put on film. It's industrial noise turned into lullaby, domestic fear turned into myth. The baby, the radiator, the trembling sounds, they're all metaphors for creation itself, for the terror of bringing something into existence when the world already feels deformed. Watching Eraserhead is like listening to someone's subconscious hum through an amplifier. It doesn't explain itself because our fears never do. If Eraserhead is the subconscious howling in black and white, then Last Year at Marienbad is the dream that follows. Elegant, immaculate, and utterly disorienting. Renee turns memory into architecture, repetition into hypnosis. The corridors never end, the dialogue never answers, and the time never moves. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Your perception has officially been upgraded. Which of these films twisted your brain the most? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you love getting lost in cinematic labyrinths, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you're ready for the next level. Subscribe, and let's keep exploring the films that make thinking feel like an adventure. The truth is, mind-blowing cinema isn't just about twists or trippy visuals. It's about movies that remind us how fragile our perception really is, how every image we see, every sound we hear, is just another story our brain is telling itself. These films, from Scanners to Stalker, from Vertigo to Videodrome, share a dangerous idea that reality isn't fixed. It's a projection, and maybe, just maybe, that's why we go to the movies. Not to escape reality, but to find out what it really is.